It was announced at school assembly that there was a famous artist coming to the school, Keith Haring.
Right, yeah, I remember that.
He was a superstar when he came here.
Now, I think he was more important to contemporary art than, say, Basquiat.
So this is the only work that will be here forever or in Australia, is it?
Yeah, it's the only permanent thing that I did while I was in Australia, yeah.
If that work was in a collection in the National Gallery of Victoria, it would have been conserved within an inch of its life. Situated right near the Tote Hotel, it had great culture around it, but it also kind of got urinated on a lot. The conservators were absolutely unable to demonstrate any understanding of contemporary art making.
From a professional conservation point of view, what they were proposing was not going to save the mural, it was going to destroy the mural.
It's a long time, more than 30 years I'm working in this field, and I keep following some paths. Keith Haring is one of my paths, and so I keep liking very much to deal with him. Keith Haring was one of the most significant artists of the 20th century. He lived very shortly in New York between 1980 and 1990. 10 years of great expression. Collingwood now is completely changed. It has become a trendy quarter where a lot of fancy galleries and shops are. It still has the impression of a poor quarter, but it's not.
Nothing happened to Collingwood Tech. Collingwood Tech was the forgotten school. You had to know how to survive. For someone to come out here, someone that was from America that was famous and someone that was a painter, that was massive.
Haring arrived in Australia at a really key turning point in art, and he showed young people that you didn't have to be an old artist that was well known and collected in order to have an influence on people.
He was still in his 20s, so he came and made the work at the National Gallery of Victoria and the Art Gallery of New South Wales, the great body painting piece for the Fashion Festival at Moomba, and, you know, ran around town tagging here, there and everywhere.
He painted the famous water window at the front of the National Gallery of Victoria. A shocking but also very beautiful painting about life, death and atomic meltdowns in the nuclear age. And sadly, it was only there a couple of weeks because a hole was shot through one of the panels. Maybe it was a slingshot with a piece of concrete, no one's quite sure. Then Keith Haring was working in Sydney. He painted the foyer of the Art Gallery of New South Wales. He cut his teeth on large-scale murals here in Sydney and Melbourne, and that's fantastic. For the first time, he used a cherry picker. He went on to create vast murals throughout the world, all using cherry pickers and other mechanical lifting devices. Keith Haring's outdoor mural at the Collingwood Technical School remains the only surviving mural from his 3-week visit to Australia.
Keith came out with John, looked at the wall, said, yes, we'll do it. And he said, would you paint the backdrop? And I thought, well, how the hell are we going to do that? Where are we going to get the paint? And they said, well, we'll provide the scissors lift, we'll provide the paint and the rollers, you and some of the kids can do it. So we did.
All the kids, you know, that wanted to volunteer were asked to. My job was to drive the scissor lift.
Now, he had a few ideas and he said he doesn't really want to tell anyone until it's finished.
I remember taking my Year 7 boys down to watch him paint, and
Remembering that the classrooms were just so volatile and they could flare up at the drop of a hat. My memory is of the boys just standing around, hands on hips, just really focused, and the feeling of serenity, of calmness. You know, they just were very focused on what he was doing and ask him different questions, and he would just very patiently just turn around and just respond to each question.
And we still had a bit of a go at him, you know, we were pretty rough those days. You know, welcome to Collingwood Tech, bang, you know, you cop that, you know.
I can remember saying to Keith, wow, you've got media after you, you're going to a dinner, you're giving a talk, and he said to me that he would rather be with us.
The kids related to him really well because he was mad on rap music. He had this ghetto bus that was about 7 feet wide, all paint spattered. They loved him. He was like a Pied Piper almost, I think.
It only took Haring a day to paint this mural, less than a day in fact. He paid a quick visit to a local hardware store, grabbed some small pots of paint and then set to work. He painted the bottom half first, tumbling, dancing figures, and the top half of the mural was just a yellow expanse. So around about lunchtime on that day, he gets down from his stepladder and in response to the question of what's to be in this top half, he asks for a piece of chalk. And he just does this extraordinary drawing of an enormous caterpillar with a computer head and authority figures waving sticks. He's just made that up on the spot as that's what's going to be in the top half of the mural. And then he gets up on the cherry picker and he paints the top half of the mural without ever looking back at the drawing.
We're amazed how he just created something just like that.
Out of his mind, yeah.
Out of his mind, you know, no sketch, nothing, you know. And joined all the lines perfect, and he was professional.
He's painting this close to the work, but his mind is thinking 60 feet to the right and 30 feet above. Everything in perfect symmetry and perspective. The sheer talent of his brain, his eyes and his hands all working together. That's the gesture, which is just as valid as any mark made by Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo.
When he got back to New York, he was pleased to know that the Collingwood painting would be a permanent work, that this painting would be visible to the public for 6 months or a year or 10 or a lifetime. But it's not, the use of the word permanent is not to say that he set out to make a durable, permanent painting necessarily. And the nature of his use of the materials indicates he wasn't thinking about permanency at all.
The painting had been exposed to rain and pollution and so on in an inner city environment. The Haring mural was deteriorating. Part of that, we thought, was probably because of the quality of paint that was used. It wasn't artist-grade paint, it was hardware store paint.
It appeared to be very faded. There had been some losses. The door, for example, was missing.
All we knew about the door was that it had been stolen in the 80s, shortly after it was painted. There was absolutely no information, no leads.
One night in 1990, after a gig here at the Tote, armed with a couple of screwdrivers, I scaled the back fence, crept over to the door. The colours were still vibrant. His signature was on it, the baby was on it, and the hinges were on the outside. 10 minutes later, it was in the back of my car. I rescued the door from the mural. It was just fading away, it was just disappearing, it was not looked after, it wasn't cared for. I just presumed that was doomed.
When I looked at the painting in 1996, it was a highly degraded surface. There's no question about that, that the painting had major problems. I felt that the image was quite readable. We felt that if we just stabilised it all and applied protective chemicals that would stop the rapid deterioration, we could substantially keep the painting, arrest all of those processes and keep the painting in a stable, readable condition for quite a long time.
Having the artwork in a condition where it is sort of ghost-like, basically, because it has deteriorated so far, is like having a neon artwork with a neons aren't working.
We felt that the meaning of the message had disappeared.
For me, it's not about making an object look a certain way. It's about ensuring that that object will still be there in 100 years or 1,000 years' time, if possible.
We started a long process which took about 7 years, and we wound up classifying it as a very significant, important keystone in the history and culture of Australia. So our classification of it led then to the classification of it by Heritage Victoria. That gave it legal protection, and it means that anybody that wants to do anything to that mural, you know, if they want to repaint it or if they want to clean it, whatever, they have to get a permit from Heritage Victoria.
Murals are a relatively new thing for the Heritage Council. In fact, the Haring mural was one of the first ones. For Haring himself, that kind of breaking down barriers between high art and low art was very important with bringing in an urban community and particularly working class communities. So it has that social significance about it. It also has I would say, a growing social significance because a much wider audience in Melbourne now know that mural and have an attachment to it. Now we have a whole lot of other communities who are engaged and stakeholders in this. We have conservators, we have art historians, we have the Haring Foundation, we have a whole range of people who are all trying to work out, is this about cultural process or is it about a permanent fixture and piece and creation of a piece of art?
You know, the fact that this like superstar artist who died at 31 came here, made this work, and then it's kind of just been left there. People wanted to get together and see something done. And the views were very mixed as to what should be done, but at least it was up for public discussion again.
I was working with the engineering department at Yarra and that to decide what art is important and what art is graffiti. And I was like, maybe I'll go down there myself and touch it up, you know, like I do that all the time. I didn't think much of it, you know, touched up a lot of Banksys, all sorts of stuff.
In the case of the Haring mural, the difficulty is that by the time we were working on the Haring mural, Haring was dead. He had painted this painting as a young artist. He was an emerging artist at this point. And what his intent would be for the mural is really hard to tell.
I went to New York in 2010 and I went and met with the Keith Haring Foundation. So they're based on Broadway. They're in Keith's old studio. It's painted top to bottom with black and white imagery. The foundation was there saying, listen, no, the image needs to be restored. That means repainting or restoring it. And they said that publicly and they said that very loudly. It was about a reproducible image, not a painterly image which required a sort of laborious process of preparatory kind of sketches and realisation. Keith made those works just on the fly.
Repainting the mural was what they saw as the long-term solution to the problem, and they insisted what Haring would have wanted. Well, you can say that about a dead person without any comeback.
Paintings in New York have been overpainted and they're no longer, in fact, the painting that Keith Haring put there. And that's what we've been about right from the very beginning, is making sure that everybody has the opportunity to look at one of the few last remaining unaltered Keith Haring outdoor mural paintings.
Touching stuff up, I think, is key, and it's okay. You know, as long as if that's what the artist wanted. I'm not sure whether Keith Haring would really give a shit. You know, he'd laugh.
You know, even when he was dying, I think again, he was still about living, so not kind of making those plans. Whether he would come back and repaint it himself, whether he would send a studio assistant to do it, whether he would employ a signwriter to do it based on his instructions, who knows?
If we put paint on the outside of particularly the red stripes, it could very well peel up, and in which case you'd lose everything.
The conservators were absolutely unable to demonstrate any understanding of contemporary art making.
From my point of view, from a professional conservation point of view, what they were proposing was not going to save the mural, it was going to destroy the mural.
that Circus Oz was going to be moved into that site. If it was going to be redeveloped, something would have to be done about the mural.
That's when Arts Victoria took ownership.
Arts Victoria put out a statement calling for a tender for proposals of treatment. This was advertised internationally.
Maybe a couple of months ago we heard from Arts Victoria that an Italian conservator had been contracted to do it, Antonio Rava.
Antonio Rava, I'd never heard of actually, but Will Shank is a San Francisco conservator, and he and Antonio Rava were involved in the restoration of a Haring mural in Pisa called Tutto Mondo.
Restoration is never a sharp good or bad, right or wrong, white or black. Giving the possibility of a mural like that being repainted or maintained as it is too sharp. I lived in New York between 79 and 80. I never met him, but I heard of him. I met Andy Warhol at the time, and so I knew the environment and the kind of energy which was around those artists. The first step in the project was just study and give advice of what was the problem, how we could do. And so we started with the chemists to come here. It was very good because the group was already formed through the work on the Tutto Mondo in Pisa. So I brought directly the same people. Everybody thought it was a ruin, it was lost, but we always thought we had to discover the real quality of the materials and the chalking. I had experience of Tutto Mondo. In that case, we had experience of the good quality of the acrylic paint under a layer of whitish calcium carbonate which formed through the plaster of support. We started from the chemical analysis, but then we started cleaning. And with some erasers, it could be possible to remove what was over the surface. And a lot of the originality of the material came up.
Antonio said we can try a lot of things for cleaning the surface, but the best way it was with erasers. I spent 6 days a week for 1 month and a half.
We never thought to find this bright yellow underneath. This was really a discovery. You see the green color, this acrylic behaved perfectly, while the red color was of another quality, something which is used for doors or for window paint indoor, while it's not well performing outdoor. So we had this paint peeling off, cracking, and discoloring. We really felt comfortable to give back the color. Not a thick color, but only a glaze. It gives this bright color appearance, which is what we need to balance the other colors. We choose a binder, which is the same pigment as the original, for not making the color penetrate too much. In this way, we can make it reversible mechanically. I think people has the right to see the paint in his quality, and we have the duty to do it.
In 20 years, the message will be gone if we don't retouching the red line. So it's better for the new generation like me to see what is the work.
It's really amazing to be so close to the paint which Haring did. It's difficult to say what the image gave to me.
What does this picture mean to you?
I knew the hard question was coming sooner or later.
He's looking at, in 1984, at the arrival of computers, the invasion of technology into people's lives.
Making it deliberately top-heavy is his fear of the future. The multi-legged caterpillar monster with the computer screen with a brain inside it, which is really a great prevision of nanotechnology, arguably. It's a vision of a machine-run world controlled by corporate figures.
Something which means a computer is taking your brain or maybe is substituting, and you can see it in a positive or in a negative way.
Well, his interpretation, as far as I can remember, was that it was students striving to the top for education. And of course, some of the kids were falling down and that, you know, you fall by the wayside.
It features his classic dancing figures that come from his immersion in the Black and Latino Hispanic cultures in New York. His dream of racial harmony for the United States, with all races working together, dancing together.
All these people are doing different things, right? Some of them, they're like dancing, they're like rap dancing, or they're like acrobatic. Some of them are almost like they're fighting, but they're all, the way they're all together means that they can't, like if one of them comes out, the whole thing falls down.
He made that statement that his meaning is not necessarily your meaning or my meaning, we make our own, but also the painting isn't owned by him. It becomes its own self and goes through life disassociated from its maker.
I was keeping abreast of all these discussions and debates about what to do with the mural. And then in October 2012, I received an email forwarded on from Jessica at Arts Victoria saying that she'd met someone who knew someone who used to live with someone who might have the door. And it didn't take much convincing to myself that, yes, I'll return it. I mean, it was nice on my wall, but it belongs there, back on the mural.
For us, it's very important to have the door for many reasons. One is the complete formal integrity of the work of art, but the other one is this fact that the door had been inside for the 30 years, and that made a big change in the quality of the materials. They are in the saturation and the strength of the original paint.
In some ways it is very surprising that nobody has graffitied over it or tagged over the mural. The fact that the door has come back with his signature on it shows that there is an amazing amount of respect for it.
Keith Haring still exists on that wall, then I think Collingwood Tech will still exist, you know?
Seeing it
is really, it's kind of surprisingly great.
If the painting is still there and still readable and still the voice of the artist speaking to you, then it's been successful. It's what we always were talking about.
The yellow ground has really been cleaned enough so that it sort of really sings again. You can actually still see the kind of gestural work or presence of Keith Haring, but the red is back. Outside of Keith being here and him being able to repaint it himself, it couldn't be better.
Having the original signature gives another perspective to the wall mural, and also in a perfect condition.
If Keith Haring hadn't come to Melbourne, maybe it might not have become the street art capital of the world.
Keith Haring said himself, the painting's not mine. It has its own life. It's a public work and it is owned by the public for as long as they care to see it there.
He did like the idea that things would outlive him and that things would go on and on. His works would go on and on beyond him.
I think that Australia has this very large-scale Keith Haring mural is amazing, enriching to cultural life and also community life in that part of Melbourne.
I like having a little bit of America in Melbourne myself.
I think we're super lucky to have it, and I think we're super lucky that it's been saved, just in time, really.
I think Haring is protected by his aura. He was coming from the low of the city and becoming famous, but he brought his spirit so beautifully.
Next week, violinist Richard Tognetti and performance artist Penny Arcade talk collaboration, their love of the sea, and 23 years of friendship. The series return of Meet the Mavericks.